I've seen The Amazing Spider-Man at the cinema recently. I enjoyed seeing this film again on the big screen. It's interesting. I saw this film twice at the cinema back in 2012, and at the time I didn't really know whether I was going to like this film following the end of the Tobey Maguire era because I wasn't. I'm not usually keen on new actors taking over from previous roles that I've enjoyed. I think Doctor Who's a different matter in that regard, but I think at that time I wasn't ready to sort of accept the idea of a new actor playing Spider-Man because I was so into the Tobey Maguire films. But on reflection, the Amazing Spider-Man as a film is quite good, and I think Andrew Garfield is very good in the role. I enjoyed his interpretation of the character. I mean, it's a very interesting interpretation, nothing like Tobey Maguire, but still enjoyable. I think from watching the film again on the big screen, I was able to get into the story and the characters more compared to the first couple of times I saw it at the cinema, and yeah, and again, as I've said, I don't think the Andrew Garfield films are as good as the Tobey Maguire films. I mean, but I do think with the Amazing Spider-Man, as a film, you can sort of see where they were going with how to sort of progress the story of Peter Parker, especially because it was sort of doing a mystery element to it, particularly with Peter's parents, who might actually turn out to be government agents, which was something that was not in the original Spider-Man film trilogy, but it was something that was in the comics, I believe. I mean, not so much in the 1960s, but I think much later on, 1990s, I think. I mean, I might be wrong on that, but yes, certainly it was very fascinating to check out The Amazing Spider-Man in that regard, and also it was interesting how they did a new take on the origin story. I mean, you could easily pick out that there were elements of the origin from the first movie with Tobey Maguire in the first movie with Andrew Garfield, but I like how they did it differently compared to, because it's not an exact copy and copy and paste routine, because and because of the way that they were sort of prolonging the spider bite with Peter in Oscorp compared to how it was quickly done in the first Tobey Maguire film. I liked the romantic setup between Andrew Garfield as Peter and Emma Stone as Gwen. I mean, I prefer Emma Stone as Gwen in the Amazing Spider-Man films more than Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen in Spider-Man 3. Not to say anything against Bryce Dallas Howard, because she was okay. She was fine in Spider-Man 3, but I think Emma Stone does it really well in both the Amazing Spider-Man and the Amazing Spider-Man 2, because the relationship. I mean, at the time, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were dating, and it was interesting to see how that was portrayed on screen. Because the chemistry is pretty evident. And with Gwen in the comics, she was Peter's first love, so it makes sense that they would do a different love interest for Peter in the Andrew Garfield films compared to the Tobey Maguire film, where Mary Jane was the love interest, was the main love interest already. I mean, that was the thing that kind of bothered me about Gwen Stacy being in Spider-Man 3, because unless she was the first love interest for Peter in the original trilogy, I probably would have given a pass on her being in Spider-Man 3, but I didn't. I think the appearance of Gwen in the film was a bit forced in Spider-Man 3, whereas in The Amazing Spider-Man, it's okay for Gwen to be in the film, because she's established and especially in another universe, it's established that she's Peter's crush or first love interest with Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. So I was fine with that being the case in Andrew Garfield's movies, and I think the relationship between the two is very well done. Watching the film again on the big screen, has made a difference. Is really different compared to seeing it on the small screen. I mean, I'm more familiar with the Tobey Maguire films than the Andrew Garfield films. So watching the Amazing Spider-Man has been interesting because I was able to pick out details that I probably wouldn't have picked up from watching the film on DVD and Blu-ray. So, for example, I'd forgotten that Peter had taken a photo of Gwen when first seeing her in the film. I mean, that was more that was quite evident watching it on the big screen compared to the small screen. I mean, maybe when I watch the film again on Blu-ray, I might pick up on that a bit more. But yeah, it was it was amazing to see how much detail there was to pick out from watching The Amazing Spider-Man compared to watching it on the small screen. I I also enjoyed Dr. Curtis Connors as the Lizard in the film. Rhys Ifans, I think is very good as the character, and I don't know if it's me. I think in the original trilogy, I think Dr. Connors was Kurt Connors, whereas in this film, The Amazing Spider-Man, it's Curtis Connors. Now, I don't know if that's more accurate in The Amazing Spider-Man in terms of adapting from the comics. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, but it's interesting how in the original trilogy it's Dr. Kurt Connors, not Curtis Connors. I mean, I prefer it being Kurt Connors, really, but I mean that's me. But I really enjoyed the development of Curtis Connors as a villain, because he starts off being, with noble intentions to prolong humanity and also to, get his arm back. But when he gets the serum and becomes the Lizard, it's pretty clear how how having the serum twists his mind, and he decides that everybody should be a lizard. I mean, I'm not really sure if that's I'm not sure why he would make that decision in the film itself, but there you go. That's villains for you, I suppose, in Spider-Man. And I enjoyed seeing Dennis Leary as Captain George Stacy, Gwen's father, because it was a very different interpretation from James Cameron's version. Not James Cameron. The actor who James Cromwell, I forgot his name. James Cromwell, who played George Stacy in Spider-Man 3. I mean, at least the role of George Stacy is more pivotal in The Amazing Spider-Man than it was in Spider-Man 3, because I mean, because J. Jonah Jameson's not in the film, I think George Stacy takes up that role before he discovers that Peter is Spider-Man, and he grows to trust him before he gets killed off. So yeah, and it was interesting also to see how the killer for Uncle Ben was handled, because for a while Peter was on the hunt for his uncle's killer, and I don't think even in the second movie, I don't think it's established. It's Peter finds out who it was that killed his uncle, because it's sort of left on an open note. He's sort of hunting for his uncle's killer, but then he stops doing it in order to fight crime in general. Whereas in the original trilogy, Peter managed to find the killer twice. He found who he thought was the killer in the first film, and then in the third film he found out it was Philip Marco who killed his uncle, and in both occasions that was resolved. It's not resolved in the first and second movie with Uncle Ben's killer. So I'm not really sure if that was going to be a thing that was ever going to be resolved. Maybe it probably would have been in the third movie. I really don't. The potential third Amazing Spider-Man film that never materialized. I really don't know, to be honest with you. It was interesting to notice that when I was watching the film on the big screen, and in terms of reflecting on how to sort of analyze the whole Andrew Garfield era overall. But anyway, Yeah, but it was nice. It was good to see the Amazing Spider-Man again on the big screen, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Amazing Spider-Man 2 next time. Let me know what you think of the Amazing Spider-Man, whether you like this film or not. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who like the Amazing Spider-Man, and there are some who don't like it. But I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it. So yeah, look forward to sharing my thoughts with you on the Amazing Spider-Man 2 next week, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care, everyone. Bye.